Okay, so today it is the day on which the important futurist poet Marinetti died. And he wrote some kind of a manifesto against Venice. Now, he was Italian, well, born in Alexandria in Egypt, but Italian. But he was violently against Venice. Why was he violently against Venice? Because he loved Venice. So some years ago, I wrote this text for a possible competition, A House for Marinetti in Venice. It might not be very well edited, but I will read it to you because today is a day when about, I think 71 years ago, Marinetti died. So when I wrote it, so I wrote just days ago. This was the time when I wrote it. I don't know, a few years ago. Just days ago, Sir Norman Foster protested against the huge billboards covering some of the old buildings in Venice. His protest was accompanied by those of other people, like the director of MoMA, Museum of Modern Art in New York, or the director of St. Petersburg Art Museum. What would Norman Foster have in common with these directors? Righteousness and goodwill. But what Venice needs is cynicism. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, cynicism, as the millions of tourists who flood its streets, canals, plazas, and buildings. All the so-called good people of this world who visit, yes, visit with capital letters, the cultural Walt Disney they help create that Venice is now, should receive from us cynicism and nothing else. Venice needs an infusion of new life, real life, tough life. Not tears, not sentimental caresses, not the melodrama of a weakened heart, but vigorous, even brutal, raw action. Venice needs iconoclasm. It needs what Marinetti advocated in his exacerbated ways. It needs irreverence, but not the apparent irreverence of Bugatti, Rolex, and so on. It needs the irreverence of Cordelia Lear. Sorry for the misspelling there, it was not edited, but I'll keep reading it. It needs true love, not lacrimogen love. It does not need inactive nostalgia, disguised in a preservationist passivity, but the spite that comes from that superior form of hate that derives from love, deeply felt love, like in the Old Testament. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Venice needs the virile love of the conqueror, his cynicism. It needs the barbarian. Maybe Venice needs to be destroyed. Indeed, would we die, ladies and gentlemen, if Venice died? Maybe if we kill the Venice within, we would be able to build again in Venice. So this is what I wrote that time, and sorry, it's neither finalized nor edited, and I truly apologize, but I thought I should remember this text. And now I will read another text, which is the Futurist Manifesto. Well, this is longer. I don't know. I could begin it. Well, this was written by Antonio Santellia. Now, why am I mentioning the Futurist Manifesto of Futurist Architecture, which was written by Santellia, but it seems Marinetti influenced it, at least in its second version. And here I have the second version. Let me see if I should read this one. I also have the first version, but it's rather long. I'll probably not read all of it. Let me see. Yeah, I think I have another. How did I call it? I'm beginning to forget. So I go to music. And here is Santelia. Yeah, the Santelia Manifesto, the second one. But why? I don't understand what I did here. I have to save it as a PDF. Sorry about this, Delia. Not Delia. One, just a second. Word document PDF. I thought it is here or it is not here. Ah, I have too many documents. I'm beginning to lose my mind. Okay, so the manifesto the Manifesto of Futurist Architecture, which was written by Santellia, Antonio Santellia, this great architect who left a great, who had a great impact on architecture until he was 28 when he died. So he wrote, no architecture has existed since 700s, quite a beginning of his text, a moronic mixture of the most various stylistic elements used to mask the skeletons of modern houses is called modern architecture. The new beauty of cement and iron are profaned by the superimposition of motley decorative incrustations that cannot be justified either by constructive necessity or by our modern taste, and whose origins are in Egyptian, Indian, or Byzantine antiquity, and in that idiotic flowering of stupidity and impotence that took the name of neoclassicism. These architectonic prostitutions are welcomed in Italy, and rapacious alien ineptitude is passed off as talented invention and as extremely up-to-date architecture. Young Italian architects, those who borrow originality from clandestine and compulsive devouring of art journals, flaunt their talents in the new quarters of our towns, where a hilarious salad of little ogival columns, 17th century foliation, Gothic pointed arches, Egyptian pilasters, Rococo scrolls, 15th century cherubs, swollen caryatids take the place of style in all seriousness and presumptuously put on monumental airs. The kaleidoscopic appearance and reappearance of forms, the multiplying of machinery, the daily increasing needs imposed by the speed of communications, by the concentration of population, by hygiene, and by 100 other phenomena of modern life never cause these self-styled renovators of architecture a moment's perplexity or hesitation. They persevere obstinately with the rules of Vitruvius, Vignola, and Sansovino, plus gleanings from any published scrap of information on German architecture that happens to be at hand. Using these, they continue to stamp the image of imbecility on our cities which should be the immediate and faithful projection of ourselves. And so this expressive and synthetic art has become in their hands a vacuous stylistic exercise, a jumble of ill-mixed formulae to disguise a run-of-the-mill traditionalist box of bricks and stone as a modern building. As if we who are accumulators and generators of movement with all our added mechanical limbs, with all the noise and speed of our life, could live in streets built for the needs of men 4, 5, or 6 centuries ago. This is the supreme imbecility of modern architecture, perpetuated by the venal complicity of the academies, the internment camps of the intelligentsia, where the young are forced into the onanistic recopying of classical models, instead of throwing their minds open in the search for new frontiers and in the solution of the new and pressing problem, the futurist house and city. The house and the city that are ours, both spiritually and materially, in which our tumult can rage without seeming a grotesque anachronism. The problem posed in futurist architecture is not one of linear rearrangement. It is not a question of finding new moldings and frames for windows and doors, of replacing columns, pilaster, and corbels with caryatids, flies, and frogs. Neither has it anything to do leaving a facade in bare brick, or plastering it, or facing it with stone, in the determining formal differences between the new building and the old one. It is a question of tending the healthy growth of the futurist house, of constructing it with all the resources of technology and science, satisfying magisterially all the demands of our habits and our spirit, trampling down all that is grotesque and antithetical, tradition, style, aesthetics, proportion, determining new forms, new lines, a new harmony of profiles and volumes, an architecture whose reason for existence can be found solely in the unique conditions of modern life and in its correspondence with the aesthetic values of our sensibility, This architecture cannot be subjected to any law or historical continuity. It must be new, just as our state of mind is new. The art of construction has been able to evolve with time and to pass from one style to another while maintaining unaltered the general characteristics of architecture, because in the course of history, changes of fashion are frequent and are determined by the alternations of religious conviction and political disposition. But profound changes in the state of the environment are extremely rare. Changes that unhinge and renew, such as the discovery of natural laws, the perfecting of mechanical means, the rational and scientific use of material. In modern life, the process of stylistic development in architecture has been brought to a halt. Architecture now makes a break with tradition. It must perforce make a fresh start. So calculations based on the resistance of materials, on the use of reinforced concrete and steel exclude architecture in the classical and traditional sense. Modern constructional materials and scientific concepts are absolutely incompatible with the disciplines of historical styles and are the principal cause of the grotesque appearance of so-called fashionable buildings in which attempts are made to employ the lightness, the superb grace of the steel beam, the delicacy of reinforced concrete in order to obtain the heavy curve of the arch and the bulkiness of marble. The utter antithesis between the modern world and the old is determined by all those things that formerly did not exist. Our lives have been enriched by elements, the possibility of whose existence the ancients did not even suspect. Men have identified material contingencies and reveal spiritual attitudes whose repercussions are felt in 1,000 years. Principal among these is the formation of a new ideal of beauty that is still obscure and embryonic, but whose fascination is already felt even by the masses. We have lost our predilection for the monumental, the heavy, the static, and we have enriched our sensibility with a taste for the light, the practical, the ephemeral, and the swift. We no longer feel ourselves to be the men of the cathedrals, the palaces, and the podiums. We are the men of the great hotels, the railway stations, the immense streets, colossal ports, covered markets, luminous arcades, straight roads, and beneficial demolitions. We must invent and rebuild the futurist city like an immense and tumultuous shipyard, agile, mobile, and dynamic in every detail. And the futurist house must be like a gigantic machine. The lifts must no longer be hidden away like tapeworms in the niches of stairwells. The stairwells themselves, rendered useless, must be abolished, and the lifts must scale the lengths of the facades like serpents of steel and glass. The house of concrete, glass, and steel, stripped of paintings and sculpture, rich only in the innate beauty of its lines and relief, extraordinarily ugly, so-called ugly in its mechanical simplicity, higher and wider according to need rather than the specifications of municipal laws. It must soar up on the brink of a tumultuous abyss. The street will no longer lie like a doormat at ground level, but will plunge many stores down into the earth, embracing the metropolitan traffic, and will be linked up for necessary interconnections by metal gangways and swift moving pavements. The decorative must be abolished. The problem of futurist architecture must be resolved, not by continuing to pilfer from Chinese, Persian, or Japanese photographs, or fooling around with the rules of Vitruvius, but through flashes of genius and through scientific and technical expertise. Everything must be revolutionized. Roofs and underground spaces must be used. The importance of the facade must be diminished. Issues of taste must be transplanted from the field of fussy moldings, finicky capitals, and flimsy doorways to the broader concerns of bold groupings and masses and large-scale disposition of planes. Let us make an end of monumental, funereal, and commemorative architecture. Let us overturn monuments, pavements, arcades, and flights of steps. Let us sink the streets and squares. Let us raise the level of the city. I combat and despise all the pseudo-architecture of the avant-garde, Austrian, Hungarian, German, and American. All classical architecture, solemn, hieratic, scenographic, decorative, monumental, pretty, and pleasing. The embalming, reconstruction, and reproduction of ancient monuments and palaces, perpendicular and horizontal lines, cubical and pyramidal forms that are static, solemn, aggressive, and absolutely excluded from our utterly new sensibility. The use of massive, voluminous, durable, and antiquated and costly materials. And proclaim that futurist architecture is the architecture of calculation, of audacious temerity, and of simplicity, the architecture of reinforced concrete, of steel, glass, cardboard, textile fiber, and all of those substitutes for wood, stone, and brick that enable us to obtain maximum elasticity and lightness. That futuristic architecture is not because of this an arid combination of practicality, usefulness, but remains art, that is synthesis and expression. That oblique and elliptic lines are dynamic and by their very nature possess an emotive power 1,000 times stronger than perpendiculars and horizontals, and that no integral dynamic architecture can exist that does not include these. That decoration is an element superimposed on architecture is absurd, and that the decorative value of futurist architecture depends solely on the use and original arrangement of raw or bare or violently colored materials. That, just as the ancients drew inspiration for their art from the elements of nature, we who are materially and spiritually artificial must find that inspiration in the elements of the utterly new mechanical world we have created, and of which architecture must be the most beautiful expression, the most complete synthesis, the most efficacious integration. That architecture is the art of arranging forms according to pre-established criteria is finished. That by the term of architecture is meant the endeavor to harmonize the environment of man with freedom and great audacity, that is to transform the world of things into a direct projection of the world of the spirit. From an architecture conceived in this way, no formal or linear habit can grow, since the fundamental characteristics of futurist architecture will be its impermanence and transience. Things will endure less than us. Every generation must build its own city. This constant renewal of the architectonic environment will contribute to the victory of futurism, which has already been affirmed by words in freedom, plastic dynamism, music without quadrature, and the art of noises, and for which we fight without respite against traditionalist cowardice. Okay, so we live in a different time, but I would agree with Antonio Santellia, and I would agree with Marinetti. It seems this second version of the Manifesto for a Futurist Architecture actually was written by both. It was initially written by Santellia, and then apparently Marinetti had a hand at it. So it's possible that this version belongs to both. Now, what they said seems to be here and there somehow in contradiction with what I say, but it's not. I totally agree with them. We need sincerity, we need honesty, we need to belong to our time. But our time is different from their time. They wrote this, more than 100 years ago. It was a reaction to the 19th century. Now, in 2020, we react against other things which belong to our time inappropriately or anachronistically. So I'll say a few things about futurist architecture by the way of the fact that Marinetti died on this very day, I think 71 years ago. So, since he was not an architect, I will talk about, the most known futurist architect and the author, at least in part, of the manifesto I read, Antonio Santellia. Here he was the man. He died at 28 in the First World War. So he died extremely young, but he left an important mark on the history of architecture. So you see, he was born in 1888 and died in 1916. Was an Italian architect and a key member of the Futurist movement in architecture. He left behind almost no completed works of architecture and is primarily remembered for his bold sketches and influence on modern architecture. The Manifesto of Futurist Architecture was published in August 1914, supposedly by Santelia, though this is a subject to debate. In it, the author stated that the decorative value of Futurist architecture depends solely on the use and original arrangement of raw or bare or violently colored materials. His vision was for a highly industrialized and mechanized city of the future, which he saw not as a mass of individual buildings, but a vast multi-level, interconnected and integrated urban conurbation designed around the life of the city. Between 1912 and 1914, influenced by industrial cities of the United States and the architects Otto Wagner, Adolf Loos, and the Genoese architect Renzo Picasso, he began a series of design drawings for a futurist Città Nuova, or Città Nuova, a new city that was conceived as a symbol of a new age. Many of these drawings were displayed at the only exhibition of the Nuove Tendenze, a group of which he was a member, in 1914 at the Famiglia Artistica Gallery. Today, many of these drawings are on permanent display at Pinacoteca Como's Art Gallery. And I'll show now some of these drawings. Some of these drawings that remained, of course, on paper, but their power to influence and to inspire remains intact. And maybe it even increased over time. So that's why I keep saying to everybody, including myself, draw, 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 model, express yourself. It doesn't matter, it doesn't get built. If you invest your drawings with an intensity of thought and feeling, sooner or later they will be recognized, and at least you achieved self-expression, which is important. So these drawings by Santellia were messianic. I mean, they were done in 1914, 1916, so more than 100 years ago, and they still influence the world of architecture. Even the movie, the Blade Runner was influenced by the visions of the new city by Antonio Santellia. The drawings are rigorously done, but they are visionary drawings. He was able also to sketch. And, strangely, he talked strongly against monuments, but his architecture is quite monumental, isn't it? Anyway, architects do contradict themselves often. They are not the only ones, of course. No, but his drawings do show great talent and great vision. Of course, from a vision to a building, it's a distance, but it's not easy to have visions either. It's difficult. I mean, these images were born from within himself. Such a city didn't really exist at his time. There were maybe some attempts in the United States towards some kind of, because this was an architecture that cultivated speed. I mean, this was in the ideology of futurism. They believed in circulation, in speed. And, after the T Model Ford car in the United States, things began to speed up. Well, for us, under the necessities of, lockdowns and all kinds of restrictions and the attack of the virus on us, we are rather inclined to be less exuberant about moving a lot, probably. But at that time, again, the futurists, at least, had this vision. They believed in high speed, and you see the highways there, going forever in two directions, and But the sketch is beautiful. It's drawn with verve, with nerve, with force. And so is this one. He obviously had, what we call visions, and the imperiousness of these visions made these drawings possible. One building was built, though, on one of his visions for a monument, actually, although he seemed to be violently against monuments, and you'll see it. It is a heroic architecture, isn't it? But the heroic component of life is it cannot totally be abolished. This one was actually built, and you are going to see it. It's a monument to the fallen. That's how it is called. I don't know exactly where it is, but it is in Italy. And it is the only building that was built on his, sketches or drawings. And it's not bad. It is impressive. It is monumental. It is rather static, but it has a genuine force. Now, this is rendering some kind of a digital image created based on his drawings, but of course not by him. It's a Santelia new city expressed in the digital language of the present. Okay, so now we go to here. There are a few, posters for when his centennial was. In 2016, they created all kinds of events and published books and so on. You see the power of a vision, the power of believing in what you feel and think, of the genuineness of what is within you. 100 years later, we talk about this man, and you see he was honored in 2016 with these publications, Antonio Santellia, L'architettura del suo tempo. Our architecture should also belong to our time. I know I didn't say something very original or unknown, but it's something that we should repeat to ourselves all the time. It should be of our time. Now, I will surprise you perhaps, as I was surprised when I was told about this and I discovered this. There was a futurist architecture where you would expect it, at least in Africa, Eastern Africa, close to Ethiopia. Eritrea was a land that was a colony of Italy, and they built a few futurist buildings there that they couldn't build in Italy, in Asmara. So once a sleepy corner of the Italian empire, Eritrea's capital, Asmara, is home to one of the world's best collections of futurist architecture. And you see, for example, this, station for Fiat. We talked today about a little bit about gasoline and cars and highways and so on. Well, this is what, I don't know what architect built in Eritrea, in Africa, but you wouldn't expect this sort of architecture in Africa. You wouldn't really expect it easily even in Europe. Look how it looks from behind, and this is, I don't know exactly when it was built, but it's almost 100 years ago. And it looks, as if it was built today. So there, you look at the building on the right and it's irrelevant for our time, but not this one, towards the left corner. They did have a vision, and the vision proved rather correct. Now, this is an Orthodox church, also in the same place. I wouldn't really call it necessarily futuristic, but it's interesting and it's even striking. Is this one? Again, Eastern Africa. What can we say? I think it's a lesson in architecture coming from where the least we expect it. A house, a villa from the same town. and another view of the same house. And here is another building which has some elements of, let's call it, futurism. But again, we are talking about Eastern Africa. Okay, so now I go to the second presentation, the one that I actually announced, which is about Wallace Harrison, the important North American architect who also died in 1981 on this day. He's not so well known, but he built a lot and some very important buildings. And Rem Koolhaas had some very affectionate words about Harrison. And I'll show you the building, the particular building that Koolhaas expressed interest and admiration for. So I don't know if he studied really architecture, but he was fortunate enough and inspired enough to marry someone from he was connected through family ties to the Rockefeller family, and that paved the way to a lot of influence and commissions and so on. He was a serious man. He was also good friends of some very important modern artists like Fernand Léger and others. So he had, I think, a sensibility that made him prone to connect with artists, and even with his own inner side that sympathized with art. A tall man, probably, I'm not sure, and rather elegant. Here he is, you can even see, actually, he's in the back. You barely see his head, but you see on the left Le Corbusier. They are talking here about the United Nations buildings, because actually Wallace Harrison, he was commissioned to be the overseer, you know, of the whole affair with the United Nations buildings. Here is Oscar Niemeyer, and some important architects here, only males, of course, at that time. Here he is on the right, and I think he looks good. I like him. So in 1941, Harrison joined with Max Abramovich to form the firm of Harrison and Abramovich. In partnership with Abramovich, Harrison designed scores of university and corporate buildings, including the Time and Life, 1959, and Socony Mobile, 1956, both designated New York landmarks. This is Abramovich, his partner, but I think the main designer was him, Wallace Harrison. And this is again Abramovich. Now the United Nations building, which was some kind of a hybrid building inspired by both the proposals of Le Corbusier and Oscar Niemeyer, and maybe there were other influences. Lead architect, he was the lead architect for the headquarters of the United Nations, coordinating the work of an international cadre of designers, including Sven Markelius from Sweden, Le Corbusier, and Oscar Niemeyer in 1952. This is the building. So he was the lead architect there, but exactly who did what, it seems is not so clear. Anyway, but it's still a building, a modernist building that stands the taste of the trials of the passage of time. Yeah, he's rather well known as being involved with this particular project, but he did many other things, and you'll see some of them. Okay, so we move forward. So this is New York City and the United Nations headquarters. The lead architect of a group of architects was Wallace Harrison. Here we see the paradigmatic towers, the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building. And here is the former Pan Am building by Walter Gropius. The skyscrapers are springing upwards like mushrooms after the rain. It's a good building, I would say, and I would see some influences, maybe more from Oscar Niemeyer than Le Corbusier. Although Le Corbusier was rather sad about losing the commission, and he claimed that he was copied, he was plagiarized, and who knows. Anyway, sorry about these pictures; they are not very clear. The great meeting room at the United Nations. Some people think the United Nations lost its relevance, but it's probably a necessary institutional body, an institutional presence in the world. Now, the New York Hall of Science, this is a very interesting building, actually, from 1964, the New York World's Fair, 1964. And, it's futuristic and also strangely kind of medieval, and it's very difficult and puzzling to unite the two, the medieval with the futuristic. So he was an interesting man with a large palette or repertoire of disponibilities, of capabilities. Look at the view from the top of this Hall of Science. Of course, it was part of the exhibition, international exhibition, but it's interesting. It is like a citadel in a way. I don't know exactly the symbolism of what he wanted to do, but it was, more than 60 years ago that he did this building. Wallace Harrison. And you'll see some other interesting things by him, including a remarkable church, the one that Rem Koolhaas admired. And he's not the only one. So this architect who is not so well known, I think he deserves to be known. Now this one, the Trilon and the Perisphere from New York, it's not 1039, it's 1939. I typed wrongly, from 1939. These are very interesting. And they became the symbols of New York, and something happened to me. When I was in New York, I did a project for Times Square that was very similar to what you will see here. And I am honest with you and with myself, I didn't know of this project. It was or at least I was not aware. I am still not aware. But when I showed my project to a colleague, I was working in the office of a Japanese architect in New York, and he said, Dan, but this is very similar to the Perisphere and the Trilon that were built in 1939. And I said, what are those? I knew nothing about them. And then, I don't know, either he brought me a Times magazine or I searched myself, and I discovered this very interesting, buildings. Well, these very interesting buildings that he built in 1939. And I don't know if I have in this particular presentation my project, but I hope I do. If not, I can search for it. You'll see it's very similar, although the scale is a little different. I think the buildings are, visionary. And look, people stay in line. Well, there was no virus then to enter this. Look at the two structures in the middle of the World's Fair from 1939. His buildings do stand out, definitely. They are abstract, they are powerful, they are archetypal. So they were about, of course, the conquest of the world by science. There was optimism in the world, an optimism we don't quite share these days. And I think a remarkable project from 80 years ago. And yes, they became the symbols of New York City, but they had been destroyed, unfortunately. And I still don't know, and I will never know if I have seen this before I did my work. I think I'm honest enough to acknowledge if, but no, if I would have seen it and I would have been aware of it, I would have never, because first of all, it's ridiculous to make a proposal that is, you know, is like copying, you know, the opera in Sydney. You know, you cannot do that. You know, you are dismissed. If you don't dismiss yourself, you know, everybody else will. So I knew nothing about this. But I did something very similar and in Manhattan. So this is a drawing, you know, and I like the drawings also. You know, you see at the bottom on the right lower corner, Wallace and Harrison, and another view. Now, in my case, the big sphere is not a building; it's actually an urban chair. But I had a trilon, but in my case, the trilon was inspired just by the site plan of the intersection between Broadway and 7th Avenue in Manhattan. I hope I have that project here because it would be relevant to talk about it. Now I'm afraid I don't have it. You see, there were all kinds of illustrations where the symbols of New York City also set on the hats of ladies, or somebody made you know, such illustrations. So New York World's Fair from 1939. These were done by Wallace and Harrison. Interesting imagination and interesting buildings. It will be hard to you know, to imagine something like this today. Yeah, I'm glad I have my. So this is the stamp with what Wallace Harrison did, and I'm sure you will not believe me. You will say you copied him. This was my project, which I did for a competition, but I will explain it. That again, at that time, as far as I'm aware, I knew nothing about that 1939 building by Wallace Harrison. But I inspired myself from the site plan of the center, how is it called, the crossroads of the world, where you have Broadway and 7th Avenue intersecting at 45th Street. So here is 42nd Street in Manhattan, here is 48th Street. And I simply took the site plan, and what you see in the site plan, you see also in the elevation. So I imagine two towers, the red tower symbolizing the king, fire, the sun, and the white tower on the other side symbolizing the queen, water, and the moon. And I wanted to, because it's the crossroads of the world there, and it's an extremely intense place in Manhattan at 42nd Street, Times Square. I wanted to somehow show the two poles in between which the human drama takes place. The masculine principle and the feminine principle, fire and water, talking about dualities, fire and water, the sun and the moon. There was also sulfur and mercury. So, but what I also did, in front of each tower, I placed a large scale urban chair. The white part, if you put together the white chair with a red chair, you will get some kind of a number 8, but in 3 dimensions, 3-dimensional. On the white part of the wall sits the red king, and on the red part of the wall sits the white queen. So they face each other, and that's what I did. In the case of Wallace, is simply, I mean, simply, you know, the sphere is much larger, is a building you can enter. But I was, because I was fascinated by the meeting between mobility and immobility, the tower, and it just happened. Well, in my case, it's not really a trilon. It's more like a trapezoid, again, dictated by the site plan. And they are a little bit different, although, you know, they seem very similar, and they are, but you see this is a little bit narrower, this is a little bit wider. And as I said, here the site plan condition is one of an hourglass, clepsydra. And because I'm fascinated by clepsydras or hourglasses, I did this project. At that time, I was also influenced by Psychology and Alchemy, a book written by Carl Jung. I did another project around that time, also dealing with the red force and the white force. The red symbolizing the king, the sun, sulfur, and fire, and the white symbolizing the queen, the moon, water, and Mercury. Anyway, this is the other project I did, and this is, at least this one, you cannot say that I copied or I, you know, plagiarized Wallace Harrison. I believe also the previous one I didn't. And this was also meant for the hermaphrodite, the dual human being, which incorporates within the two forces, the two principles. So where is the plan? This is the ceiling plan. The plan is here with two entrances, an entrance from here for the red king or fire or the sun. And here is the entrance for the queen, water, the moon. And they circle each other like in a kind of an erotical dance, like in a tango, and they meet in the center where the chemical wedding takes place. And I imagined a chair, a golden chair for the hermaphrodite being, sorry, the picture is not very clear, but you can see on the left the sun and on the right the moon. The bipolar personality of the hermaphrodite, and here the king and the queen can sit, yes, back to back, but they form one single body. And this is a, you know, kind of a golden throne, and you see it in plan is also the motif of the hourglass or the clepsydra. And the sky kind of indifferent to the human drama below, and this was supposed to be golden. So this is the earth and this is the sky. Anyway, moving forward to Sophronia Brooks Hall Auditorium in Oberlin, USA from 1953. So, you know, not a building that to pass by without any kind of interest. It seems deserted, but I don't know, it's acceptable. Now a building at Harvard University, a library, different from the buildings that you saw before. So again, this is Wallace Harrison, who died on this day, I think in 1981. This is also, I think, a good building. You know, yes, the architectural language seems to belong to mid-century, mid-20th century, but it's not a bad building. Now, this building attracted attention to Rem Koolhaas, and indeed is a remarkable building. The First Presbyterian Church, or the Fish Church in Stamford, Connecticut. Look at the interior. You know, this is a felt building in the sense that, you know, he didn't copy, you know, the Gothic from the 12th century. He simply gave expression to maybe his own faith and his own longings. And it is a modern building. It is mysterious inside and outside also, maybe to an extent. This is a fragment of the stained glass windows, you know, with narrations from the Bible, but abstracted and modern and based on the triangle. And it's nice, I think. So Let's see, for example, number 17. Where is number 17? Is here. And here we read that the large bands of red on the left side symbolize sunset at the crucifixion. Anyway, it's a complex sequence of a narrative sequence about, the narration of the Bible. It's a good building. I like it very much. And, I wonder why we don't have here such buildings. Well, we don't have such buildings here because the Romanian church thinks that, to have faith means to be uncreative. Totally wrong. In fact, we are insulting God. I have to say it. We are insulting God because if man is made in the image and resemblance of God, and if God was and is creative, then man should be also creative. I'm amazed that the Orthodox Romanian church doesn't understand this. They're actually betraying God. That's exactly what they are doing. What else can I say? It's very sad. I mean, alone there, Wallace Harrison honored, God and the creation and everything, spirit, through his rather, small building compared to, the big cathedral that is being built now in Bucharest. Look at the artist, how he works on the, you see, he does work like an artist, free hand with, his sleeves rolled up. I like him. He obviously had an artistic temperament and it shows in his buildings. Well, as I said, he was lucky. He had family ties with a pharaonic family of Rockefellers. So a tower in Cleveland, Ohio. Well, this one is, what can we say? It's a tower, a North American tower. He also built the Empire State Plaza in Albany, which has some remarkable things. All these buildings are done by him. And, there is force here, there is power, there is virility, there is also ingenuity, formal ingenuity. So this is the capital of the state of New York, Albany. And here we have rhythm, we have almost the militaristic rhythm of these towers. And then we have this building here, which probably would have been liked by Brâncuși. It's a big auditorium. This is another kind of building, but we'll come back to the auditorium. And sculptures adorned. So it is modern architecture, built for governmental functions. This is the egg. This is the building that we should look more at in detail. He built it. This is the section through the building, and it was done just as it is drawn. And, I wouldn't say it's the least interesting building on earth. Wallace Harrison, Albany, the capital of the state of New York. It's built very well, and it stands the test of time. The egg, the beginning of the world, if we are to use Brâncuși, the words of Constantin Brâncuși. So this is the political center of the state of New York, but not in New York, upstate New York, almost far away from New York City, in Albany. Okay, and now some towers in Manhattan, Rockefeller Center, formerly known as McGraw-Hill Building. They built several buildings here, and they do have power, and they do have even a certain kind of elegance in the maybe predictable to an extent. Although we talked about the other day about Yamasaki, we see the same kind of windows, vertical narrow windows, and I think they are valid towers, architecturally speaking. Another building also, this was known as the Exxon building at the Rockefeller Center. So all these buildings were built by him, well, by them, Harrison, Abramovich. It seems the the presentation ends here. I was a little bit surprised myself, but we saw 125 images with his work, and we talked also about futurism. And so my presentation today, or my presentations today, will end now, unless you want to talk a little bit, if there are people here besides me. Well, there is, yes. Juana and Diana. Well, thank you to both of you.